So thank you so much, Usha. Usha Symp is a conceptual artist whose practice interrogates the intersection of gender, labor and power through the transformation of everyday domestic objects. You can see her bio in the papers that are floating around, but I'm just going to read the rest of it. By recontextualizing materials such as irons, brooms and wooden pegs, Symp sculpture and installations destabilize normative associations of women's work, reframing acts of care and repetition as aesthetic and political gestures. Her many commissions in public space continue these concerns. Usha is a visiting professor of practice with the SARChI Chair in South African Art and Visual Culture at the University of Johannesburg. Her work is included in the collections of the Aziko South African National Gallery, South African Foundation for Contemporary Arts, Johannesburg Art Gallery, and the Constitutional Court in Johannesburg, among others. So over to you, Usha. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Anthea, for inviting me to this discussion panel. And thank you, Brenda, as always, to be part of this institution here. Thanks, everyone, for coming. I've put together examples of my own work that speak to different narratives around the dynamics of public spaces, infrastructure, commemoration. I have a lot of slides, so I'm going to go through them faster and show you more, and then we can talk, and I'll give a little bit of information on each project. So this was a project in 2008 at the South African Chancery in Addis. It was with Mpeti Morojele, MMA Architects. And what was interesting about this in terms of, I'm speaking quite literally about infrastructure in some cases, is that this screen was designed as part of the building, and then I was brought in as an artist to do something, to make a screen. I could use any materials that I wanted to. It was a year in design with incongruency between the client and myself, because they wanted something quite cliched. They wanted the big five, and then they wanted Ndebele designs, and then whatever I proposed was either too conceptual, and eventually we settled on kind of rock art images. So that was also like, often it happens where there's like a misalignment with artistic language and artistic, especially conceptual art, I find. This was the making of the work. So the image is created with pop rivets onto mesh that I had custom made. I had a limited timeline, and so I worked with a day shift and a night shift of assistants, pop riveting continuously into these designs. I used washable paint to mark areas that needed to be painted. There were two designs, and I conceptually worked with Addis as a port of entry by land and by sea, and because it was the South African Chancery, to use some kind of South Africanness, and yeah, this was it. It was the perfect kind of reference that worked in the end. There you can see the color being washed off. You can also get a sense of the scale of the artwork. It's massive. I also used up the country supply of pop rivets in this project. No, literally. Did I tell the story before?
You did.
I did.
But you can tell it again.
Shall I tell it again? Okay.
Different audience. Yes.
So this was an early project. I still didn't know how to count at that stage. I didn't understand how many pop rivets I would need. And so I was buying like 50,000, and then another 100,000, and then another 20,000, and I was using a specific size. And so I kept on going from one supplier to another and finishing their supply. And in the end, I needed a last, I don't know, 25 or 30,000 pop rivets, and everybody was sold out. And then eventually somebody gave me the number of someone in Cape Town and said, this is the person who imports the pop, or this is everybody buys from this person. So I gave him a call and I said, I'm looking for this size of pop rivets. And he said, there's some crazy woman in Johannesburg.
Did you get the last?
I did, yeah, I got it correct. I also didn't go to install the work. I was literally giving birth to my daughter at the time. She's now 18 years old, so this was 18 years ago. And so the engineer came down to Johannesburg. We had extensive meetings, designed the framing structure for this together, and I had to give like very clear installation instructions. If you look at this image here, there's a little tag on the corner of each section, and then I made like a little plan, like a puzzle on how to put it together and what goes where, which direction, left, right, back, front, all of that. Which seems like a simple thing, but it's, yeah. I put this in because it's such a great example of collaboration, where architect and artist work together. This is a mosaic that I did 2 years ago at Red Hill School here in Sandton, and I worked with Asher Marcus and Hubo Design from the very beginning. So we had a getaway session in Mildersdrift somewhere with his team. I did a strategy session with them. Oh, I'm a graduate of an MBA, so I can do those things too. So we did a whole strategy session around their organization, and then I led them through a design workshop. So these are all the architects. And that exercise led to the design of the whole building. We also used, so Red Hill School uses a specific teaching methodology called the Reggio Emilia teaching methodology. And so we used that methodology in a design sense to design the building, and also I used it to design the artwork. So then I had workshops with the kids. We worked with it's a preschool. So I worked with the preschool kids through several workshops. This is some of the workshops. And then I also did workshops with the teachers. And then as the artist, I used all of that material to design the mosaic. So it was integral to, Stephen was talking about community earlier, to a sense of community. So then there's also like real ownership of the artwork. It's 154 square meters. It wraps around the inside of the courtyard all around. It was a year, like I think from design to installation. This is some of the production of the work. And then some of the installation. This is a very different approach to participation and making artworks together. This was in the Eastern Cape. I had done quite a bit of work in the Northern Cape and Eastern Cape through CSI funding, working with communities around kind of social development. And this was one of the projects where I worked with youth, unemployed youth. I put this in because it's such a great example of working collaboratively with people, but also with the broader community in that we created a chalkboard kind of mural that elicited responses to how people felt about their place, and then use that towards other work. So a kind of holistic approach that's not just a pretty image, where public art becomes a vehicle for broader change, I guess. This is the wings at the Radisson Red Hotel. And this was quite different to working collaboratively with the architects. I was brought in right at the end when the building was already done. they had asked me to propose a work, and I had started making wings out of ironing base plates, sole plates, on a much smaller scale, and then I just thought, oh, wouldn't it be amazing to make a massive set of wings? So the shape of the wings that I had designed was very different to this. They were like wide like this, they were going outwards. And then when I did a site visit, and they showed me where the artwork would be, and I was standing at that kind of apex with this point coming to a point, and it just like changed what the artwork would look like completely. And so I changed the shape of the wings, and it's become, oh, this is interesting. I have a studio with a low ceiling and limited space, and so the artwork was made entirely horizontally. I only saw it vertical when it went on site. When we delivered the wings, it was still a construction site, and they directed us to deliver there on the right-hand side. You can see on a flatbed truck. And then this crane hoisted the work and carried it over the building onto the other side. And so for a brief moment, the wings did actually fly. It's become like a social media kind of, everybody takes selfies with this piece. For me, it speaks about the kind of invisible female labor in the development of Johannesburg, through migrant labor, through the family dynamics of what happens in migrant families. I like that the person activates the work through their own body. Yeah. This is a very old work. It was one of my very first public artworks. It's made with safety pins, and it's called Pin Code, which is probably why I got the commission. That's at MTN's head office in Fairlands. And that circular structure that's there, that was there already. And when they took us on a briefing session, the idea was that the way they described it was that an artwork sat underneath this circular thing, and lighting would kind of project onto the work. And I made the work hang from that structure as opposed to underneath the structure. That was the making of it. Every few years I go and I maintain the work. So if there's any pieces broken, we hire a cherry picker, we do clean up, dust the whole piece. So every 5 to 6 years I get called in to come and maintain the work. That's it at night. How am I doing on time? I put this in. This was a proposal for a work at JP Morgan. They have this 3-story atrium in the inside of their building, and they commissioned me to make a work specifically. They asked for a hanging work inside the atrium. I prepared this proposal. I've got a video so you can see. How do I... So I prepared the proposal. They loved the idea. Those are stove spirals, like from the stove plate. So it resembles water, and there's this hanging boat. I made the boat. I think it's 6 or 8 meters long. What's it? Something like that. So I made the boat in the studio. I worked with the engineer. We designed not only those, we call them drapes, like with the spirals on them, but a whole grid that would go into the ceiling as a hanging structure for the whole work. And JP Morgan, through their own safety protocols, could not they couldn't make it possible. And so I think for a year or 2 years there were meetings and other fabricators brought on board, and because it's a bank and it can't be closed, you have to work after hours and weekends. And so in the end, the entire project didn't happen. So I have all those spirals and I have the boat. And I got paid, so they paid me for the work that was done. But it's just an example of how bureaucratic systems can just fuck things up. Yeah, you know, like here was the artwork made and everything, and everybody loved this piece, and it just never happened.
Beautiful piece.
Thank you. And I'm going to, I want to rework those draperies, and I want to show it in a different context. I put a few works together under commemoration. This is the piece that Stephen mentioned in Kliptown. This is where the Freedom Charter was adopted. The pillars were already done, and then it was an open call that I responded to, and I got the commission to make the work. I chose to make these figures because it's like 7 meters up, just to get kind of silhouette kind of figures. And I looked at the history of how the Freedom Charter was adopted, and the people were asked to write down their ideals and what they would imagine South African Charter to look like. And because it's called Kliptown, I took reference from the word klip, as in stone. And when I was a child, I was taught Gujarati, a vernacular, by my grandmother on a slate pad like this. And so I learned to write Gujarati on a slate pad like this, pad with a piece of slate. And so I took those two ideas together to work with the slate material and made like layers and layers of it to create these figures. They have not been damaged or destroyed or vandalized because you can't reach them. This was part of the Sunday Times Centenary project that was mentioned earlier. I got commissioned to commemorate the site where Gandhi led a protest in 1905, I think it was, where the Indian registration certificates were burnt in a potjie pot like this. So inside the pot are images, kind of graphically drawn images of the certificate with flames, so it works as a zoetrope. So you turn the pot and you can see the flame kind of burning. And then the top part, initially I had like half the letters of truth on the image on the left, and then as you spin it, truth was meant to be revealed. But it never spun fast enough, so then I replaced it with the word truth. I had some issues with this work when later so much information came out about Gandhi and how racist he was, how sexist he was, and I felt a bit embarrassed about this work. Even though it's not specifically about him, it's about the moment of activism. And I had long conversations with Eric Itzkin about it recently. It's been refurbished recently. Jennifer from Sticky Situations has overseen there was some graffiti to clean up that and to make the turning work better, replace the vinyl, so on. And so after lots of discussions, I decided to keep the work as is because it was made in a time when I wasn't aware of his history, but also the work, I think, doesn't valorize Gandhi as much as it does commemorating the event. But it was interesting to just re-look at something that has been done already. And like, had I been given the commission now, I'm not sure what I would do differently, but I would definitely be more informed, and I'm not sure what else I would do, but it wouldn't look like this, I don't think. I was very fortunate to be commissioned to make the portrait for Nelson Mandela's funeral. This was made with seeds. Often the starting point for me is the material. For me, the material is important, and so I used seeds to make his portrait. It had to be done whilst he was still alive, and I had to sign confidentiality things to not know about it. I worked with a team who were not aware of what it was for. Brenda's written about this too. This is a commission that I'm working on at the moment. It's in Bremen, Germany, and it tells the story of a refugee from Sierra Leone who about 15 years ago was killed in police custody by a form of torture called emetic torture, where they put a pipe down one's throat and put a medicine that makes you to vomit. So he was arrested on suspicion of carrying drugs. They did this form of torture, and he was in fact carrying drugs, but they continued to administer this emetic, and he died. And his death brought a lot of attention to kind of police brutality. It was also around the time of Black Lives Matter and so on. And the city has, through the work of a lot of activism in Bremen, decided to make a public artwork. Through an open call, I got the commission. And so I made the word force, which speaks to like that he was given this thing where his body forced to expel what he was carrying, the police force, the fact that he was a refugee, he was forced into this situation. And so this is currently being fabricated, and I'm going in September to Bremen. This is 3 years in the making, and it will be launched on the 24th or 26th, whichever the Saturday is, of September. The letters are like slightly sinking because on his death certificate, the reason for his death, which is the title of the work, is called Death by Drowning. That text that you saw inside the letter C was taken from an interview that I listened to with somebody who had experienced emetic torture. And he said, black people have feelings, and then he paused for a bit and he said, just like Germans. So I decided to put that text inside, like, so when you're sitting inside, you read this text. And there was a lot of discussions about this text, even in the local newspaper. And it was very interesting. There were lots of people on either side of it. And the commissioning agent asked me to reconsider this. They said, it's your decision. If you want to keep it, it's fine. And after many discussions and many readings and so on, I decided to take it out because I felt that it was more divisive than I wanted it to be. But I've replaced it with the title of the work. So also, I think one would question, like, death by drowning, what does that mean? I've also changed the design slightly. I've made the C a bit more slanting because I want it to be inviting for people to engage with, but also uncomfortable. So you can sit in the C, but you're going to slide off. And so I'm also speaking about kind of, as audience being, like, are we complicit in the violence? Are we, you know, yeah. This is asking me something. Can I say cancel?
Yeah, just say cancel.
I've also got, oh, how do I, I've also got a show at the Gerard Marx House, which is just next to where the artwork will be. And so I've looked at the history of Bremen, and Bremen is built on the production of coffee. They are the largest distributor of coffee to Europe. And they get coffee from mostly Africa, also Venezuela and Vietnam, and a few other places. And so I'm speaking to the history of Bremen and how it's developed, linking it to refugees, to immigrants, to extraction, to all kinds of things. And so I've made paper here at Pumani Papers from coffee husks and coffee bags, and produced a whole lot of text-based works that relate to the text-based public artwork. I just put two very quickly this morning to show you. And all of it is speaking about notions of being a refugee, foreigner, immigration, notions of home. I'm also working with ideas of counter mapping and working some kind of map work into the artworks. And it's scary how the content of this work, the subject matter of the work, is so relevant in South Africa right now. So it's not been easy work for me. It's been quite difficult. But it's there, and it will be shown soon in Bremen. I put this in. This was done at Sabiqua Art Center in Benoni. They asked me to make a mosaic, and I took 3 days to go through their photographic archive to find the right image. This had lots of other people in it and lots of other things, so I photoshopped away a lot of details. But it was, I put it in as an example of commemorating their legacy in a way. So one of these young girls is still, she still goes to Sabiqua, and she's an adult now. And so there's quite a nice relationship to the mural. This was done through Art at Work. Leslie Perkis, who was mentioned earlier. During December, so the Sandton Business Improvement District put a rope light around their trees over December the 1 year, and then the next year they had all this rope light, and they said, let's commission an artist to do something. And so I got asked to propose. I said I'd be happy to do something except reindeers and Santa Clauses. And then we came up with this concept of these figures that lined Maud Street in Sandton. They were connected to the street lights pre-load shedding, and they would light up when the lights came on. So the figure on the left sits on the top, and then his feet are at the bottom. They were really playful. People came at night with their kids and their dogs and whatever, and yeah, that was some of the production. I was pregnant with my daughter at the time. That left one we secretly called Zuma. Nobody knew about it. But they were like 50-something figures. And then I did them over 2007, 2008, and then 2009 they were kept on right through the World Cup. They had World Cup like soccer balls and whatever for 6 months. They asked me to make a giant one. This was done in the backyard of my studio without any safety gear. We were given a weekend to finish this work. It was crazy. That was it being transported, and that was it lit up. I've got two more slides.
Okay.
This was a project I did in collaboration with Hannelie Kutsia, where we collected sand from places of trauma and made a sand mandala in St. George's Cathedral. It was a really, really powerful project. And I'm going to be doing something similar in Bremen, with sand from Lai Almakonde, who's the person who was arrested, from his home in Sierra Leone, next year probably. So we sifted this intricate design over a week and then swept it up and offered the sand to the ocean as a kind of healing. This was on the APSA building during Art Week, and I made an animation that showed there. So it was quite nice. The animation flowed from the...
Why is it not animating?
Oh.
No, Usha. It doesn't want to.
Okay, sorry guys.
I don't think it's, I think it's a still.
No, it's not a still.
Sorry.
Okay. Anyway, there's a figure that sweeps across and cleans up the city, which is what I thought was needed at the time. This is on N Street in the bathrooms, and so I chose to show a young female figure who's kind of, zappy, and I chose to show the male toilets as a young father. This is just an example of works that I make with wooden pegs, and I put that in to show you this big peg that I made for Burning Man. This was 2022. It's made from steel tubes. It was produced in Lagos, transported to the US, installed with lots of equipment. A mega project with people from all over the world that I worked with. Weighs 40 tons. It was an amazing experience for me to be there at Burning Man. There I am in the left. We also had a big party there, as one does at Burning Man. It's designed as a seating, so you can climb up and sit on it and look at the sunrise. Thank you. There we go.
Thank you. Do we have any questions or comments before I jump in with one?
Where is the peg?
Hey?
Where is the peg?
It's this one? It's currently in the UK. So it traveled from the US to the UK, all 40 tons of it. And there's a private developer who's interested in renting it for 5 years in a upmarket housing, like a complex.
I guess that brings me on to a question of when these installations are temporary,
Yes.
how do you navigate what happens to the sort of afterlife of these artworks after they've sort of held their space and time?
In a big way, to let happen what happens, and that's part of its story. Where it's a permanent piece, there's a whole maintenance plan, and one goes back and cleans it up and whatever. But I think a temporary work is for that moment as well. Yeah.
I'd like to ask about, so for example, the work outside the Radisson Red, which is such an iconic piece in Joburg, but it's interesting because it's commissioned by a private entity, but it has such a public existence, and it seems, with your other kind of commissions in corporate spaces, you're working in this, they're not really art spaces,
Yes.
and they're not sort of outdoors in the public, they're somehow in between.
Yeah.
But how do you think private and public entities and spaces can or should work together, and how have you found that process in your work, working at this kind of interface?
I've had a lot of challenges in that there is a disconnect. And I think the intention is to have something wonderful, but there's sometimes some educating needed, because I think as artists, we see the potential in something and expect others to be able to see the same potential. So I've had to learn to be quite clear through like a 3D model, which explains explicitly what you're going to do. And then there's a clearer buy-in. So I think it's about a kind of professionalism from the artist side as well. What was your question again about?
I was asking about how you think private and public can or should work together.
Yeah, I think if it can happen at the starting, then it works better. Then there's a collaboration from the beginning, where issues can be sorted out, but also that the design is integral to what is happening, and it's not an afterthought. Yeah.
There's a question.
I'm just wanting to read. Thank you very much, Usha, for the fantastic presentation. I think maybe the question is directed to you in particular, maybe also like Stephen can respond. This is in particular to the commissioning of public artworks. I mean, we've seen obviously with the Rose Fall movement, I don't really have to speak much about it, but I'm also maybe in relation to the work that you did with Gandhi, can you potentially think about decommissioning public artworks that don't necessarily serve their commission? And if this becomes like a protocol, can it also feed into the policy documentation, as a whole guideline to, I think the posterity of these objects and these commissions for future audiences. I don't know if this could be an interesting
Yeah.
thing to look into.
I've never had a word decommissioned, so I can't speak to that. But I mean, I don't know from a policy perspective. I can't answer that from that perspective. But it's interesting, and definitely, like the nature of a public artwork, or these kinds of public artworks. I try to look into things like anti-monuments and that kind of thing, so that we're not looking at the typical bronze figure. But our histories change and things come out. So decommissioning is a valid thing to do, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, the decommissioning is kind of like related to deaccessioning, okay? And it's policy driven, and usually it has to do with, so if in a city the public art is operating in a proper system of management and governance and oversight. So if Eric Itzkin had a team and had a budget, and if there were works that, I mean, I'm always interested in the Kentridge, the Firewalker. Okay. That piece, firstly, it was erected as the women who had the Mbalula business they were hounded out of the city. Simultaneously, they were no longer allowed to make their fires in the city in order to cook mealies. So it's this work that is paying tribute. It's installed by the JDA with ratepayers' money, and on that very site is where women used to make their fires, in that part of the city. And then this thing goes up, and it's a constant labor of maintaining it, because people in that neighborhood don't get it. So it's a little bit like the Brenda Fassie. Brenda suddenly ended up in front of Baseline, and there was nobody there anymore. So they moved Brenda to the market. So you can do that with a bronze statue, okay? So I definitely think that there has to be a policy that allows for decommissioning, moving work. And they did it, of course, at the union buildings. I mean, when they put the Mandela big statue in the Union grounds, there were other statues that they moved around. And of course, we know the famous Cecil John Road at UCT. So, oh, and the other really interesting example, it's not quite public art, the Market Theatre Art Gallery in the 1980s, Stephen Hilton Barber did a photographic exhibition of the workers on his parents' farm, of the male initiation of the children and of the workers on his father's farm. And they put up all these photographs in the Market Theatre. The workers in the Market Theatre took it down. So public art, certainly, if it's going to have a kind of a very negative effect on people, then it will either get vandalized or there needs to be something else that is done. Yeah.
Can I just add to that? You used the word neighbourhood in reference to the Firewalker site. That's not a neighbourhood, is it really? It's a highly transient space. And despite all the kind of socio-economic issues, politics and controversies surrounding commemoration of an incredibly vulnerable kind of business that those women initiated, ownership is relative to the process by which the work arrives and the communication that's part of that process. And you demonstrated quite a lot, like the school commission is really a really nice one because you've got a captive audience. Those are going to be the everyday users of the site. And so for a period of time, even the kids are going to have a connection to the iconography and the mosaic because they themselves were contributing from a mark-making point of view. The ambition up to 2010 was really interesting because you had lots of neighborhoods that were impacted by the World Cup, if you think of training stadiums and those kinds of things, and ways of engaging. We had a lot of interaction with a training stadium, for example, in Pomashu in KZN, and just hanging out with that neighborhood and trying to understand what is relevant and what makes sense, and trying to get that right. So the deaccessioning thing is an interesting one in the museum context because there have been mistakes in the past. You deaccession something and you realize big mistake because history rewrites itself a million times over. You know. So what we know today about X and tomorrow it's Y. So there's no linear narrative per se, and we actually, where possible, need to be rigorous. Part of the debate around the deaccessioning of colonial monuments, on the one hand, keep them up, because we need to be reminded of this, of the tyranny of these leaders, and on the other hand, it is just not tolerable. And you have a space in between where how do you manage in the public realm a sense of histories and then the palimpsest of histories that come after them and so forth. So it's a profoundly brilliant conversation to have, extremely hard to do in terms of implementation. Being successful through ownership or buy-in, at whatever scale.
Any further thoughts?
I just have one more comment, which I think is also linked to this idea of deaccession and what that does. And this is the question of the pedestal. And I think it's really interesting, Usha, that you spoke about the Cape Town works, that they continue to exist because they are inaccessible. And that this idea of permanence in public art and what we make the objects out of, right, and where we put them, and do they go on a pedestal like Stephen was talking about? You know, there was no pedestal, and so now the piece in the Union Book doesn't get treated through the colonial methods, right, and through the colonial framework of a pedestal means a precious object. And just thinking about the problematics of that, like, what does it mean to assume that something from the side of the stakeholders, from the side of those who are funding the artwork, this idea of permanence and what that means. Do we accept that an artwork must be permanent, right, or must exist in that kind of permanent way, which goes back to your question of temporality versus a permanent artwork. I think that there's something really important there that needs to be sort of highlighted.
Just one last thing. The Hyde Park Shopping Centre in the 1970s was like the shopping centre that commissioned more public art anywhere else. Cecil Scott knows Eduardo Villa, Balzanelli, etc. Because it was a commercial, shopping centre. When the new management came in, they just trashed it all. And the Johannesburg airport, the old Johannesburg airport, had 20 or 30 major art commissions, huge commissions, doors and big sculptures, gone. The entire thing, just gone. I remember I was in national government at the time, and somebody called me to find out if I could do anything about it. And, you know, so these things, if they're owned by the corporates, they could go at any time. If they are owned by government, and suddenly they shut down the building, like they've done in Joburg or whatever. So the stuff comes and goes, and the Ernest Ullmans, amazing in Joburg, have always been preserved. They're in Rosebank, you know those figures next to the Gautrain station in Rosebank? Those have been in the city for 60 or 70 years, and they've just kind of been moved around to different places. So yeah, no, I think deaccessioning has to be possible for public art, definitely.
Can I make, yeah, go for it.
Just in terms of like maintaining work and looking after it, that portrait of Nelson Mandela was commissioned by Department of Public Works and is sitting in a crate in someone's office. Last I checked, and that was like 5 years ago.
Sure.
So I don't even know where it is.
Gosh, I think, unfortunately on that note, we have to wind up this discussion, but it would be great to talk about some more of these things over lunch, but which is not yet. So now Stephen Hobbs is going to join us up front here with his presentation. While we shuffle seats, I'll just introduce Stephen briefly. You going there? Oh, thank you.